Alright, so raid army tier list. We're going to be assuming that we're tackling these tier bosses at a pretty realistic power level because you can outscale them a lot. So something like Bellanoir and Bellanoir Libero, you would just take them down with a bunch of chickpeas and stuff like that, and you don't really need to account for any sort of weakness. Like if you bring a neutral pal against Bellanoir when it's maxed, it doesn't really matter. You don't really care about that. So we're going to be assuming that you're fighting Bellanoir around the level you unlock the altar, Libero around that level like 50, Ryu around level 55, Xenolord around level 60, and Moonlord at around level 65. Or 45, I guess, but that level 45 Moonlord or level 50 Moonlord isn't super interesting. So a couple of factors to also mention is Rescue Pals. Very good against Ryu, Xenolord, and Moonlord. Not that good against Libero and Bellanoir because they just destroy all the beds. And you don't really have access to Pal Pods at that stage anyway, if you are fighting them at that realistic level. Then also a couple of things with like how strong the pals are and if you have access to meet terrain and all that kind of stuff. So we're just going to start with Bellanoir around level 30 to 40. We got these types of pals that you can bring. So mostly focusing on what you'll catch in the wild here. You could wait just a couple of more levels and go catch 15 Germantide Ignis on Sanctuary Island 2. You also have the option of just going around level 30 and mass catching Ganglers. Like you can catch 15 to 30 of these on the Shipwreck Island and bring. Xenolord is a very good pal at this stage of the game. It has a great learn set, but it is tricky to get. Gonna have to be pretty lucky with the meteors to have one at this stage of the game. But if you do have one, it's great to just bring along. Like it probably belongs up here, but I ranked it pretty low because you can't just go and catch 15 of them. And same thing with Astegon and Orsurk. Great pals for the fight, can be found on Sanctuary Island 3, but they're more rare spawns compared to just catching Germantide or Gangler. But it's really just about having Dark Dragon to resist her dark attacks, and then you're good to go with this Orsurk, Astegon, Xenogard, Gangler, like any mix of these as well. You could just like do a little bit of tricky catching to just get a couple that you might want for base work anyway, around level 35 to 40, and then just bring up a little Gangler army of fresh caught pals. Could wait for level 35, do some pal surgery, but it's pretty expensive at that stage of the game. So moving on to Libero, again assuming that you're fighting her at a pretty reasonable level, mainly because you have stuff like Germantide Ignis versus Jet Dragon. So Jet Dragon does have higher attack stats, so once you do get to like this absolute maxed out 15 pals, you got trust, you got everything like that, then you don't care about the phase 2 ice change really. But it does kill it a little bit slower than Germantide Ignis just because it does get this freeze effect. So Germantide Ignis, slightly lower attack than Jet Dragon, but does have this fire element against phase 2, being pretty useful. And then Neptilius just seems to be the pal. Like it has this Thalassonic Laser that actually hits Libero. Most exclusive attacks don't hit her. Holy Burst isn't very strong. So Neptilius, just great attack stat. Doesn't have Dragon or Dark, but doesn't really need it. Just makes up for it with that pure amount of damage. Maybe if you're doing like a pure budget build like 0 stars fresh caught pals, it falls down a little bit in terms of survivability. But I'm assuming that you're around that level. You got a couple of 4-star pals and some souls and stuff like that. Then Neptilius is fine. So Jet Dragon already mentioned in A tier, just dropping down because it is weak to that phase 2 ice change. Libero is actually a great pal against herself. I was a bit reluctant because you do need to defeat Libero to read Libero, but I feel like it's worth mentioning that it is a great raid army against herself. And even the normal Bellanoir could have probably been here as well. But even if it does like this resist the damage, the Nightmare Ray and stuff like that, Nightmare Bloom, are just very powerful skills. And then the highest attack stat does resist the dark attacks. It doesn't really mind the ice attacks, I guess. They do hurt, but still just a great amount of DPS that it can bring to this fight. Same thing with Necromus. It's really like just, I guess they are very equal. It just loses out on the Siren of the Void. Or I mean the Nightmare Bloom, while Twin Spears doesn't really hit. So Bellanoir will just end up doing a little bit more damage with that exclusive skill. Bastigor, sort of same thing here. It's very good when it does the phase 2 change, doesn't get frozen. But it doesn't resist dark. So it will be more like once you have enough survivability on them, they are very good. They have that small hitbox, they have the very good stats. And freezing, one thing worth mentioning with these raid bosses in general is that the status resistance rate for these are very low on Bellanoir and Libero. Ryu has a little bit higher. Moonlord is immune, I believe. And then Xenolord just has an incredibly high status resistance rate. So bringing a bunch of ice attacks against Libero in phase 1 will almost keep her frozen the entire fight, and bringing like electric in phase 2 will keep her stunned for that quite a bit, because she does have a very low status resistance rate. Then I think we'll move on to Rio. Same thing as Bellanoir, does get bumped down quite a bit because you won't really have access to a Rio. It's very similar to German-Tide Ignis, but it can't get the breeding exclusive skills, can't get Legend, but it's still like a Fire Dragon Pal, which is the best elements against Libero to resist phase 2 and have the bonus damage in phase 1. Just becomes a very good element to have. Finsider Ignis, so this one is also, it's pretty weak, like you're gonna have to give it more stats, more investment just to have it survive the fight, but it does deal a big chunk of damage, especially to Bellanoir Libero's pretty tricky hitbox to hit, so it's pretty much like Finsider, Ignis, Libero. I guess Jet Dragon does have Beam Comet being pretty nice, but Beam Slicer is just better. I think like you just want the Beam Slicer, maybe Lightning Streak and Airblade or something like that. Flame Funnel is also great in phase 2. But it doesn't work very well with like the water exclusives, giving them soaked and then they get lit on fire and they half each other's damage. It's just a bunch of counter synergy. And then some more like dark pals that are part fire as well. So it's just these pals with a high attack stat. They're a little bit glass cannony. So the difference between these pals and these pals up here really is that you will need to invest a little bit more to have them survive the fight. And as mentioned before, like Gangler Ignis, Bushinok suits here, Finsider Ignis, all these pals, once they do get knocked out, you can't really have pal pods and beds and stuff against Libero, since she just destroys them. So then we move on to Blazamut Ryu. I mean, Ryu, when I've been doing it recently, when you get to the phase where you can fight it, it feels a little bit easier than Libero at her respective phase, just because it's so weak to Holy Burst. So just tossing Holy Burst on a bunch of pals. Then you do want like the pal pod strategy to work, so you want some either fire or water pals. We got some fire or water pals here. So if it wasn't for the pal pods, again, if you do have these maxed pals, these B tier pals, Anubis and Orsurk, actually can get quicker kill times because they don't get stunned in the phase change and they don't get electrified in phase 2. So they will just keep on attacking. But let's assume you're fighting Ryu at a like respectable level to not just overpower, then you do want the pal pods to work, and you do want these fire/water pals, and these pals just seem to work the best. Just some, I don't know, like Holy Burst, Hydro Slicer, Airblade. Not sure if they have fixed Wall Splash, it's a little bit bugged last time I tried it, but just running those type of attacks, or even just Rock Burst over the water attack is good, now that he's running into melee range a lot, just tackling pals. Then we have a couple of decent options, like Jet Dragon is still Jet Dragon. Like, it will resist the dragon attacks, not too good against electric attacks, but still good enough to just kind of shred him down. And then D tier, Frostallion, Gangler Ignis. Frostallion is still good, like it gets the Holy Burst and stuff like that, but it will die unless you invest quite a bit in it. It's decent, but it's not really gonna do the trick. And then Gangler Ignis, just being this like fire pal that just works very well, but lacking a little bit of bulk compared to these best pals, lacking a little bit of that electric thing. So Gangler Ignis will struggle a little bit against Electrify. So it's the same thing there, like with a little bit of investment, it can work better. But overall, it should be decent. Like, you're kind of just bursting through phase 1, and then your pals should survive enough with that Holy Burst. Like, he doesn't really attack that much in phase 1, so you should be good to go with these pals. Pretty decent. Just resisting those dragon attacks and stuff like that. Then we have Xenolord. So really, if it wasn't for the pal pods working again, a lot of these pals would go way down and Bastrigor would be king. But now that pal pods work, you really just want pals that can dish out as much damage as possible while not like just dying to Meteor Rain, I believe is the skill. That when you're using like your Finside or Ignis army, one Meteor Rain is usually just enough to kill all 13, and that gives your rescue pals a lot to do, and Xenolord will actually focus the rescue pals a bit, so you do want a decent amount of bulk. So having Ice or Dragon, I would say, is very important against Xenolord Ultra with that Meteor Rain, because you do want to resist the Meteor Rain, you want to resist the Cosmic Meteor, the Beam Slicers, the Blast Cannons. These are his hardest hitting like AoE skills as well. They will hit very hard. Like, you don't really care that much about satellite bit and fireball and those type of skills. So just resisting the dragon attacks brings you up a bunch, and then not burning is also extremely important. So Germantide Ignis, still very good despite being Holy Bursted, just because it works so well with the Palpods. It can get Meteor Rain as well, very strong. Just working great there. Kinda like Ryu, but Ryu can't get Meteor Rain and no Legend, so it ends up being not that bulky really. And Jet Dragon, just a really good Dragon Pal. When I did the test during Faybreak, it ended up with like the fastest kills on its own against Xenolord, just because of you get this bonus dragon damage because it is a dragon on Meteor Rain and Beam Slicer and Blast Cannon, resists all these Xeno Guards and Xeno Vaders. So yeah, as mentioned, you wanted Ice or Dragon to resist Meteor Rain. Dragon seems to be a little bit better, just because it also resists all those like Xeno Vaders that do spawn if you're not timing the Meteor Rains perfectly. I prefer to have that manual control a little bit, where either I use my mounted Frostallion to clear out the ads really quick, or you have some Jet Dragons to swap in for the Meteor Raid spam. But it works out pretty well. But really, we're getting down to these like paths that are equally good, but just a little bit squishier against Xenolord, and then they need more investment. Otherwise, they will get overwhelmed by this Meteor Rain, Cosmic Rain stuff, and he starts tackling your rescue paths instead of the raid paths. It just spirals out of control, really. So we got Orsurk, still a great pal, a little bit on the squishy side, but it does get that bonus damage on dragon attacks. Just works out pretty well. Pretty easy to breed for Meteor Rain as well, so that gets ranked a little bit higher just with how easy it is. But overall, it has a couple of good things going for it with this dragon. Electric doesn't do a whole lot for it. Like, you can add some lightning streaks and stuff like that. You could do some interesting stuff as well with like mixing some Orsurks and Neptilius, or mixing Orsurks and Fincider for that electrify combo, but it just doesn't work very well against Xenolord because you can only do it the one time. Frostallion just seems like the hitbox is just bigger than Bastigor's, and that lets it down quite a bit. And the exclusive skill is a lot worse. So Bastigor, he lost out quite a bit with the exclusive skill when Palpods weren't working. I was not running it at all, really, Glacial Impact, because they all just grouped up and got AoE down together. But now that Palpods work again, the Glacial Impact is safe to run, clears the ads quite well, just does a lot of damage. So that's why Bastigor is ranked a bit higher. Better hitbox, and Glacial Impact is now pretty viable over Frostallion's like Crystal Wing. But still, like, Frostallion is the go-to mount, so still gets to shine. Fincider Ignis, yeah, like the damage is definitely there. It's just too squishy. It will have your rescue pals doing a lot of work. But, I mean, it's still decent. Then we have these two, Gangler Ignis and Germantide. So Germantide is just a weaker Germantide Ignis. It loses 10 attack. It can do, like, some Lunker stuff, potentially, but it is overall just worse, since they have, like, you're mainly running this Holy Burst, Beam Slicer, Meteor Rain build, let's say, or you're adding Airblade over Meteor Rain. Then, like, doing Lunker stuff just doesn't really work out. So, overall, still good. Still a Water Dragon Pal, which is excellent elements, but just a little bit weaker than Ignis. And Gangler Ignis, I mean, it's the same thing there. It's just, it has the excellent attack stats, it has that part fire and stuff. But just, I mean, partly just not resisting Dragon as well hurts it quite a bit. But does have these like good attack stats and stuff. So if you do give them a little bit more stat investment than these other pals, they will be just fine. And keep in mind that this is still like, even if we have like D tier, it's looking pretty bad, right? We got D tier pals, but this is still like the top 10 pals out of 226 pals. So even if it's in D tier, it's still doing very good, in my opinion. Then we move on to Moonlord. So still Neptilius. I think they're getting like a pattern here. We had Neptilius against Rio, Neptilius. And I mean, it would be here, but you're not catching Neptilius at this stage of the game. It's just working out well with the extremely high attack stat, really putting out a lot of work, and the fact that it does run this Lunker build very well. So the problem with the Lunker build was that nothing was really strong enough to utilize it over like doing the Holy Burst Airblade thing. Neptilius actually does put out quite a lot of work with the Lunker build, being able to do that Thalassonic Laser thing. I'm not sure if the DPS, like Holy Burst is still so much DPS, but I feel like just having this Lunker for like Hydro Slicer and Thalassonic Laser does provide quite a lot. I mean, it depends. You can also do some stuff with like swapping away Legend for Lunker and instead running like Serenity, Lunker, Demon God, Musclehead. It's just pretty versatile. But Neptilius, if you're doing a specific Moonlord thing, then you're probably doing Lunker just because you want Hydro Slicer bonus damage. Same thing with Finside or Ignis. Just being able to run that Lunker build is pretty nice, but overall it's just this incredibly high attack stat. It seems to move pretty well, works well with PAL pods. So just an excellent PAL there. Just shreds through the boss with a high attack stat, running those basic attacks, really Dark Wisp, Beam Slicer, Hydro Slicer. Orzhok also did very good there, just being this like sort of slim PAL. Finside or Ignis with the trigger happy also did extremely well, but it's more like you get the bonus damage on the Beam Slicer for Orzhok. Small as well, pretty good. Can get Legend on it. So B tier, I feel like Bellanoir is a little bit slept on here because it doesn't fan out the exclusive skill. You just kind of stay centered. But you're probably not breeding like a specific Bellanoir army for this fight. And then Libero just good as well. Shadowbeak, the Divine Disasters are decent. And Necromus also like decent hitbox and decent stats. But what really let these down, I feel, was for Shadowbeak, the tracking was maybe not as great as I was hoping it would be. And then the like running away with Divine Disaster, it does spread them out, but that's not super important with the Palpods. I feel like running away with Divine Disaster was decreasing the DPS of Dark Wisp. Something like that. And then Necromus just seemed to stack right underneath Moonlord and sort of get stuck missing a lot. So not sure what that was about, but it just didn't perform super well. It was still decent. And then D tier against Moonlord. Still just good pals that can work. Bastigor, just again, excellent hitbox and good stats, but it just lacks this, like all these pals will either do bonus damage with some sort of like Hydro Slicer or Dark Wisp or Beam Slicer, or it's got the exclusive skill. Bastigor just gets none of that, so it's just the decent stats and good hitbox that makes it really good. So Bastigor is still like up with Neptilius as the sort of one pal fits all for the raids. It does work like that. But probably like Neptilius and Orzhok right now are pretty nice dual combo to have, because you can do some funny stuff with Electrify and Soaked. Then Gangler Ignis again. So this one, it's just a very good hitbox and good attack stats. And then it's always like down here in the D tier, just because it doesn't have those like resistances that you would be hoping for. But you can get like some bonus damage on the Hydro Slicer. It works very well in Palpods, high attack stats. So if they ever change the Palpods from this burning thing, it's gonna fall way down, I feel. And then Jetragon as well. Just high attack stat. Moves quickly from the Palpods to get in range for attacks, which you might notice like a couple of pals, they really take their time getting back in range. And that's a lot of DPS lost. So Jetragon just, it will get shredded by that first eye beam. But there's a couple of things, like if you're only rating things around that, like you can shoot the eye before you bring in the army. You can have the army spawning in behind Moonlord, and then the eye won't attack them at all. Like there are a couple of things to just avoid that altogether. So a couple of big pals do perform better if you're not just like kind of starting the raid randomly. Like if you do plan how you're going to do the raid, even against, let's go back to Xenolord, like, sure, the ads, it was this, like, ice versus dragon thing, like, yeah, the Xenovaders do this, and it's dark, and on paper, everything is stuff, but really, like, for me, I kill those ads. I use my Frostallion, I do the double Blizzard Spike on one pack, Blizzard Spike on the other, maybe Holy Burst a third, I got the Plasma Cannon, maybe even rocket launchers, like the Terra Prisma, or I have the Jetragons in the party and just swap for Meteor Rain spam. So yeah, sure, like there's a lot of min-maxing to be said and talked about and how to counter this and that, but really a lot of just like strategy and tactics negates a lot of that stuff. So, but it's pretty boring to just go like, yeah, you just use the highest attack stat pal with the most powerful attack in the game. Neptilius, I'm looking at you. But that's the way it is right now. That with pal pods, you don't care about defense. Like, as mentioned, like, yeah, it sucks when you're, let's say you're doing 13 pals and 2 rescue pals. When all 13 Fiendsider Ignis die to 1 Meteor Rain, it's not great. But as long as you have like a couple surviving, and you can do them, and that's another thing as well, like you can do the manual rescuing if you embrace that as well. Like swap 1 Gobfin for a rescue pal. Once that Meteor Rain lands and kills all your pals, you just send out your party pal, rescue pal that never takes breaks. You lose a little bit of DPS, but in terms of just having a hassle-free raid, it's very chill. So it's a little bit as well, like, are you comparing, do you want an easy raid or do you want to beat the world record for like speedrunning it? There's a couple of things to take into account here. So it's not gonna be perfect for everybody's playstyle. Like some pals will be better than others if you as the player are just watching, and some pals will be better than others if you are adding some player DPS. Like Fiendsider Ignis is probably the biggest advocate for that argument. If you do add like player damage, then you reach the stun phases before any Fiendsider Ignis dies. Like you'll get Xenolord to phase 1 and phase 2, like summoning ads and stuff before they go down. And if you're just watching them fight, like first of all, you're tanking like half the attacks if you're active in the fight as the player. That's attacks that are not going to Fiendsider Ignis. Like if you're participating and Xenolord aims Meteor Rain at you, that's perfect because he's not aiming at the pals, and you shouldn't be that close to your raid army. Another thing with tactics as well, just being on the opposite side of your raid army and stuff like that. So just hopefully this will give you a general idea. There's a lot of pals that I probably didn't bring up because I was a bit reluctant to rate pals that I don't run myself. So if there's any raid army I'm missing out on, like way down here somewhere in the Z tier or Z, like Q tier, that's where the Herbals are at. So I didn't want to rate my like Herbals. I got some Chickabees, like this meme armies, like Walaska would probably be like decent down here on most of them. It's just huge and not really any redeeming factor. So mainly the way it works right now is you want these pals that are either fire or water for most of the bosses. Then dragon seems to be like the best element besides water and fire, just to resist dark and dragon. And ice is also decent, just bringing it up there. Hopefully we get some more elements for the raid pals as well, so we get to bring like some grass armies and stuff like that. But yeah, that's it for this raid tier list. Leave some comments if you feel like any pal was missing from this list, and I might try breeding a raid army and giving it a go. So yeah, thanks for watching.